Welcome back to Z-Speed, and thanks for tuning back in. Today we'll be installing this aftermarket PRL Intercooler on our 10th Gen Civic Si. This thing is almost twice the size as your stock intercooler, so if you need help installing one of these in your car, just stay tuned. Now, when it comes to modifying your 10th Gen Civic, you need three things to really wake one of these cars up. The first being you need a lot of air. The second one, some extra cooling. And then third, you need a great standalone tune. So we'll be addressing the extra cooling by replacing the intercooler, and that should avoid some of the heat soak that a lot of the stock Civics run into. Now, to gain access to the intercooler, we will have to remove the front bumper, so you'll need to elevate the front of your car with either jack stands or ramps like I have here. And what we need to do is get this thing up in the front so we can get underneath the car and remove the undershroud or part of the undershroud. And we have to basically remove a bunch of push pins from the front of the engine bay and underneath to get this bumper to release. We also have some 10mm bolts and even an Allen wrench style bolt like you see right here. We've got a couple of those. So we've got quite of an elaborate array of things to remove to get this bumper to release from the front of the car, but it's not that hard, it's just time consuming. And once we get all those removed, the bumper comes right off. So to start off, I'm going to use a very small flathead screwdriver to just start releasing a lot of the push pins underneath here. And you could use a plastic panel removal tool as well if you want, but I just found it was a little bit easier to use a little flathead screwdriver. Some of those push pins get caked with a bunch of road debris, so it's really hard to get them to break loose. And I found the little tiny flathead screwdriver seemed to work a little bit better. Now, I chose PRL because it's one of the best products out there, and the instructions that come with PRL Intercooler are awesome. It shows you bolt by bolt every single thing that needs to be removed from the undershroud on top, and even tips on how to remove the front bumper itself. So I'm going to be showing myself removing some of these push pins, but refer to their instructions to make sure you get every single bolt and fastener removed. So you can see there's even some tips on how to release the front bumper right here. I'll go over that step by step. But yeah, hats off to PRL for the great instructions that come with their product. So once you're done removing all 7 push pins or plastic clips, the 2 bolts, 10mm bolts, and the 2 hex bolts, then we can go ahead and go up top because we're all done underneath, and we can start removing some of these push pins up here. There's quite a few different styles up here. Some are a little bit easier than others to remove, but overall it's not hard at all. It's not any more difficult than the ones you just did on the undershroud. So we're going to go ahead and start by removing this plastic panel right here. It's the easiest and probably the best first step. So just go through and remove each one of these little plastic clips. And you can, once again, you can see I'm using a flathead screwdriver here to remove all these. And once you get them all removed, this little panel just lifts straight up and out of the engine bay. It's really easy to remove that. So next up, we're going to be removing a little rubber strip that lays directly above the headlight assembly, and it's got 5 fasteners that hold it down. 2 are push pin style, and then there's 3 that are kind of like flush with the rubber that are a little hard to remove. And at this point, I'm going to recommend that before you start this project, that you have some extra push pins on hand. You can go to Amazon and buy push pins pretty cheap that replace most of the different styles on the 10th Gen Civic, so you might want to pick some of those up before you start this job. I found a broken one that I just removed. You're bound to find some broken push pins in here, or some. You may break some when you're trying to remove these, and it's great if you've already got some on hand to replace anything that you might break while removing these. So you can see here I've folded this rubber strip over on itself so I could access it from underneath to get my little flathead screwdriver underneath it. It seems a little easier to go underneath here. Those are really flush and tight with this little rubber strip, so these are the more difficult ones to get off. But just take your time, don't destroy the little rubber strip trying to take it off. Be gentle with it. And now you're going to do the same to the other side. You're going to remove the other rubber strip. Now the top's all complete, we're going to move down to the side marker area. We have 2 bolts to remove, and we're going to remove this one right here and this one right here. And then we're going to detach the side marker itself. And what that does is it allows us some room to pry on that corner of the front bumper to detach it from the body of the car. So we need to get in there to pry on that area right there. So obviously this part's very simple. Just get a Phillips screwdriver and these 2 bolts come right out, no issues with that. Now as far as the side marker goes, there are no bolts holding this in, just some tabs. And so I would highly recommend that you get some plastic panel removal tools before you start this job. You could use a little flathead screwdriver over here to pry on this, but you could scratch the paint or the marker itself. So if you've got one of these little plastic panel removal tools, it'll make it pretty simple and you won't damage anything. And I'm going to show you a close-up of what I pushed on in a second. But once you get that to release, then you're going to grab the side marker, and there's a little bulb that sits in there, and you're going to remove, you're going to hold on to the bulb and just rotate this whole thing clockwise, and it'll slide right out. So that was pretty simple right there. Now this is the part we're going to be pushing inward on right here. This tab, you just push inward and then you pull out on the side marker, and it should release really easily. Pretty simple if you know how to do it, but it took me a while to figure this one out. So push in here and then pull out on the side marker. So now it's time to start removing the front bumper from the car. We're going to be pushing down these 2 black tabs that were under the side marker here. You can see this one right here. I'm going to push down and then pull outward on the bumper, and that's released. So we're going to do the same right here. This one's a little more stubborn, but it's the same exact process. Push down, pull outward, and it should separate from the little black tab here. So that's separated. So now that we've got this separated and we're able to pull the corner out a little bit, now we'll be able to visualize 3 more tabs that are directly under the headlight assembly right here. So you've got a little room, not much to work with, and you're going to definitely need a plastic panel removal tool for this. That one was too big, so I got a smaller one. One about this size is what you need. And we're going to be doing the exact same thing, pushing down on some black tabs and then pulling on the bumper to release the bumper from the tabs. So this is a little more difficult because you don't have a lot of working room here, but you can easily visualize these black tabs once you remove the tabs by the side marker. So that's what allows us to do it. So you have to do it in 2 steps. Do the ones on the side marker, then the ones underneath the headlight assembly. And now we can move up to this very thin, delicate piece up top. This is a little plastic piece. Same thing again. Just 2 tabs up here, but it's a little more difficult to get these to release. And this thing's a little flimsy, so you want to be careful not to just tear this little black piece off of your bumper. So you see I'm being careful, and it's very, very flimsy and floppy here. So just be careful and go slow with that. Now you can see all I did was just slightly yank on this bumper and the whole thing released. So we've got it this far. Now we're going to go to the other side and we're going to do the exact same thing. So that's what it takes to remove the bumper. It's not really, really hard, but there's some delicate pieces. This top piece up here is probably the most delicate piece you're going to work with. Once you get that top piece off, you can see it likes to reattach. For some reason, I would disconnect it and then it would snap back in. So you may have to play with this one a little bit to get it to release. But finally, I got this thing to release. And then once you get that little flap off, you can go ahead and gently pull your bumper and set it down. So that's probably the hardest part of this job, is just getting this bumper off. But once you get the bumper off, it's going to be a lot easier to work with the actual intercooler itself. So let's take a closer look at the tabs underneath the headlight. This is what it looks like right here. You're pushing down in that little black box with a plastic panel removal tool, and that should get it to release. There's one directly to the right of my finger right there as well. And I think there was a third one towards the center of the bumper, but it just detached when I yanked on the bumper itself, so it was easy to get that one to pop off. These are the ones that are on top of the headlight assembly. They're a little more difficult to remove. You know, they kept reattaching themselves. After I pushed down the tab, it would reattach very easily. So take your time with these. They may be a little hard to detach. So now it's time to get to the funner part, which is removing the old intercooler. And first we have to remove some of this plastic ductwork that actually directs airflow into this little tiny intercooler. So we're going to start off with the flap on top, which is attached to the back side of the bash bar. And I'm going to use a little small flathead screwdriver to work on the two plastic push tabs that actually hold this to the back of the bash bar. The main takeaway here is that you're only about 5 to 6 inches away from the AC condenser, and you've got a little sharp object like a little flathead screwdriver like I'm using. And what you don't want to do is accidentally puncture a hole into your AC condenser while you're trying to remove these two plastic push pins. They're very stubborn. They've got a lot of debris mixed into the little push tab area, so it's really hard. It was really hard for me to get these loose. It took me about 10 or 15 minutes to break these things loose. Main thing is you just don't want to punch a hole in your AC condenser while you're trying to remove these two. But it's just two push tabs, so it shouldn't take you too long. Just be careful. Now that those two tabs are broken loose, we can drop this little piece of the ducting down, and you can have easy access to these two plastic tabs, one on either side, that hold it to the rest of the ducting. Once you get these two out, this little top piece will just slide right off. That'll make it a clear route for us to get rid of the intercooler next. So we'll be taking the intercooler piping loose, and then the intercooler will slide right out of the front, and we don't have to worry about that flap getting in the way. So releasing the intercooler piping from the intercooler itself is very simple. Just two 10mm bolts, break those two loose, and then you may have to jiggle the intercooler piping a little bit to get it to separate from the intercooler. So we're gonna go ahead and take these two bolts out. Just 10mm sockets, all you need. I got a little extended socket here, and I was able to break these loose real easy. So once you get this is the driver's side done, I'm gonna switch over to the passenger side. Okay, exact same thing with the passenger side. Two 10mm bolts releases the intercooler piping from the intercooler itself, but we have something extra on this side. We have a metal brace that's attached to the frame of the car via one single bolt, and then it has a little rubber grommet that rests on top of the intercooler. You can see the rubber grommet and the brace. Let me straighten this view out for you. There we go. There's the bolt. I'm not sure if it's 12 or 14, can't remember that one, but we're just gonna break that bolt loose, and then this little brace comes off the top of the intercooler. That's just to stabilize the intercooler to the frame so that nothing moves around, and it's pretty easy to remove. It's a little hard to get your tools in here or your socket in here, but it was doable, and I got the brace off. We're gonna save the rubber grommets here, and we'll be reusing one of the braces, and we have a new one from PRL as well to install, but we'll go over that in a minute. But yeah, inspect your grommet, make sure they're decent and don't need to be replaced or anything. And once that's removed, you can see I was able to easily remove this tiny intercooler right here. So the intercooler is now free. You can see it's kind of beat up here. And I've got a little tip for you later on how to keep your new intercooler from getting damaged by road debris. But yeah, this thing came out real easy. Was a piece of cake here. Not much to removing the intercooler. So now it's time for a side-by-side comparison of the OEM versus the aftermarket PRL intercooler. You can see that the PRL is probably twice the width of the OEM intercooler and about 1/3 taller. So we got a lot more air volume being cooled here. This should really help the heat soak situation. After you do a couple pulls with the OEM intercooler, you get a lot of heat soak. Look at the end caps, plastic versus billet aluminum, milled billet aluminum. Beautiful work on the end caps and nice welds here. So PRL really went overboard. This is a good case of the aftermarket piece being far superior to the OEM piece, or when we're talking about intercoolers here. So I would highly recommend this PRL intercooler. There's a few different types on the market, but this one's super high quality. As far as air temps go, this is supposed to decrease the air temp, post-charged air temps by between 36 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit with a 9 horsepower increase and 3 foot-pounds of torque, supposedly. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, before we place the intercooler in the vehicle, we do need to place some metal air guides versus the plastic ones that we're going to take out completely. We're going to replace them with metal air guides, which is kind of a nice little upgrade as well. And it's just held on by 2 bolts, and they're going to be Allen wrench style little bolts. So one on each side, very easy to put in. I can't remember exactly what size Allen wrench I used on that one, but very simple to place these in. Just tighten them down and you're good to go. So there's an air guide on both sides. So once you get both of these placed on, we're ready to go ahead and install the intercooler. So now we're going to place some aluminum adapters onto the charge pipe. You can see these little dowels right here that line up to the charge pipe indentation. So there's only one way to put these adapters on. You can see there's a rubber O-ring in there to complete the seal. But yes, this only goes on one way, and we're using the Allen wrench bolts once again. So you can only get these hand tight, but we're going to torque them down as best we can. We don't want any vacuum leaks. And if you're to get any leaks, this would probably be the area that you might get one. So you want to make sure that these are nice and snugged down. So I'm just going to place both of these bolts in loosely to get them, the threads started. And then once I get them semi-hand tight, we're going to go ahead and then we're going to torque them down as best we can with an Allen wrench. Of course, I don't have any specific torque specs for you because we're using an Allen wrench, but you want to snug these up really tight, or as tight as you can get them by hand. Obviously, you don't want to crack the plastic intercooler piping, but make sure they're nice and snug. Last thing we need is a vacuum leak here, so pay special attention to these. Now, before we place the aluminum adapter on the passenger side, let's cut these plastic air guides from the OEM intercooler off. We're going to need to remove these to make room for the new intercooler. Now, I've got some tin snips here to cut through this plastic, but you really don't have to have that. I wasn't sure how thick this was going to be, but it wasn't that thick at all. Traditional scissors should work just fine, but we're going to just cut these little plastic tabs flush with the bash bar, and now we'll have plenty of room for the new PRL intercooler. Okay, to place the new intercooler into the vehicle, you're going to reuse the old grommets that held the OEM intercooler in. This is what they look like. They're circular. Hopefully yours are in good shape. Mine were decent. If they're decayed, you better replace those. You can see they fit right into those little circular recesses on the bottom, and then the pegs on the new intercooler fit into those. And this is the original brace on the driver's side. We will no longer be using this one. We'll be replacing this brace with the aftermarket brace that PRL sends with your intercooler kit. This is what it looks like right here, and it bolts up perfectly, and you can see the rubber grommet on top and there's one on bottom. So we'll be using all 4 of those grommets again, and that's what the new brace looks like. And then we'll be reusing the old brace on the passenger side over here. So at this point, I will tell you that it's easier to have two people do this process of mounting the intercooler into the vehicle. It's a little cumbersome, and this thing it's a little heavier, obviously, than the OEM intercooler, and it wants to just fall forward and right out of the vehicle. Even once you get the pegs lined up correctly into the rubber grommets on both sides, which I'm having a little difficulty over here on the passenger side, but eventually I get it lined up correctly. Once you get those pegs placed into the grommets, you would think, oh, okay, it'll just sit there. Nope, not gonna happen. This thing's pretty heavy and a little top heavy, to be exact, and it wants to fall forward out of the vehicle. So you'll actually have to hold the intercooler in place while you place the two mounting brackets to keep it stable. So at this point, if you have another person, it'll really be a big benefit for you. But I didn't, unfortunately, so I was able to do it by myself, and you'll see that happen. Right here, I'm trying to get the brace into place, and I did just set it in there, but the driver's side brace is the one that you're going to want to bolt down first. This is the easiest one to get access to. Remember, the passenger side was kind of hard to get in there and remove that, so it's definitely hard to place it back in as well. This one's the easiest one, that PRL provided, that holds this whole thing in place. And you'll need this intercooler stabilized and mounted before we can do anything with the intercooler piping itself. So we're going to place both of these braces on, tighten them down, get this thing nice and secure, and then we're going to bolt down the intercooler piping back to the intercooler. So I didn't actually show myself bolting the intercooler piping on there, but I'll show you the after effect. But yeah, make sure that you get these brackets down and then tightened up, and then we can go ahead and place the intercooler piping on. Now we can put this little spacer or bracket onto the passenger side intercooler piping. It only goes in one way. See that gasket right there? It has to face towards the intercooler piping. You can't put it back on the other way. So it only goes on one way. That's the good news. And then there's a gasket on the other side that goes up flush against this intercooler. So this is what it looks like all mounted up, and I've already placed the intercooler piping or tightened it down. We're reusing the same bolts that we used, the OEM bolts. We're going to be reused here. You can see I've got them tightened down, and this is what it should look like when you're all done with the driver's side. So that was pretty easy to do. And then now I'll show you the passenger side, what this looks like over here. And you can see I've used the original OEM bolts here again, and there's a little rubber grommet up top, but see that little spacer right in between the intercooler and the intercooler piping, and it only goes in one way. So that's it. Just make sure that you tighten these up pretty tight. Obviously you don't want any vacuum leaks in here. This is another area where you could get a vacuum leak if you don't tighten those bolts tight enough. I don't have any torque specs for you, but I just hand tighten them nice and snug, and I didn't have any problems with leaks that I know of, at least right now. So everything seemed to be working real well. Here's our new little fins here, that are metal fins, replacing those plastic ones that we cut out. But yeah, this is it. This is what it looks like, and it's a solid mount. Once you get it in there, this thing is not going anywhere. It looks really good. So hopefully yours will mount up just like mine did. So placing the bumper back on, let me tell you, it was a lot easier. Just like most things in life, is when you first do something, it's a little bit harder, and it gets easier every time you perform the same procedure. So yeah, it was a lot easier putting this thing back on, but now I've got a little tip on how to keep your intercooler from getting damaged by small pebbles and road debris. So I bought this Honda Civic used with 100,000 miles on it. It's a 2017. It's now 2023, July, as of this video. And you can see that the OEM intercooler is pretty damaged. I'd say maybe 75 to 80% of the fins here are bent in some form or another. And it's really dirty looking as well. You can see that it's pretty worn out here. And it's really not that old. 100,000 miles. It's looking like it's definitely been freeway travel because a lot of small rocks and debris must have been pelting this thing a lot often. So I was thinking when I put this PRL intercooler, and it was a $674 piece, you really didn't want it to end up like this after 4, 5, 6 years. I really didn't want to spend all that money and have it look like this. So I think I came up with a way to help mitigate the damage from the small rocks and debris on the road. So I went to Lowe's, but you can go to Home Depot as well, and I picked up some aluminum screen, the type that you would use to enclose your porch or your back door. And this stuff is really working well. You can see all the little bugs that's caught. I left this dirty just so you can see what it's screening out. Some small bugs are still getting through, but I haven't seen any damage from small rocks or pebbles on my actual fins yet. So I've been running this for several months, and it washes off pretty easily. So I haven't seen any pebbles strike the fins yet, which is great. Anything you can do to preserve the life of your brand new intercooler is going to be great. You can see I've used some aluminum tape right here to kind of tape this down. I went all the way around and used aluminum tape here and there. It was just an experiment, and now I'm going to go back with some small self-tapping screws and secure this permanently because it's worked so well. But yes, this might just help you out. There's enough airflow through the screen to keep your intercooler nice and cool. It's not obstructing the flow. I was worried about that at first, but this seems to be working well. No problems at all, and it's really definitely catching a lot of small bugs and hopefully deflecting a bunch of pebbles and rocks as well. So if you're wondering what kind of screen I got, this is what it looks like right here. I got this is basic aluminum tape is what I used, which is held up, believe it or not. And then I got aluminum. You don't want to get vinyl screen because it probably wouldn't hold up to small pebbles. I would probably go right through that, but I got 36 by 84 inch roll. It's charcoal in color. You can get just a regular aluminum, or you can get pre-painted. I like the darker screen, and it's really working well. So, give it a try. It might prolong the life of your intercooler fins. So I'm going to link this video below, but this is a video by Edge Autosports. These guys are really great. I've subscribed to them. I recommend you do if you like Civic stuff. They've done all kinds of work on the Civic, but they took a Mishimoto intercooler, which is basically the same volume as the PRL, and they put it on a dyno after they installed it just to see what it did with no tweaking at all. And then they did a custom tune. So this is the just plain old installation and the difference between the two. A little bit, not much, slight improvement for torque and horsepower, nothing significant, but we're not placing this intercooler on trying to get increased torque and increased horsepower. We're putting this on to mitigate any heat wash coming from the turbocharger through the intercooler and then into the intake. Once they started tweaking the timing and doing a custom tune, it's amazing the results they got. They got the 10 horsepower that PRL talks about, and they got like 22 foot-pounds of torque after they did some adjustments and fine-tune this thing. So you can look forward to this kind of horsepower and torque if you go with a custom tune after you install this. Okay, last but not least, the only difference I noticed after installing the new intercooler is instead of a negative 14 PSI when I'm not on boost or just at idle, you have a vacuum, and it's normally for the SI or the Civic in general is a negative 14. Now I'm running a negative 10. What's that mean? Do I have a leak? I couldn't tell you for sure. I'm no expert when it comes to the vacuum pressures on the Civic, but now it's consistently running a negative 10. Now, if you have a vacuum leak and you're hitting boost hard, sometimes you'll get like a weird cutout, or you'll throw a code. I haven't had that. It seems to be running great in boost. It performs really well. I've hit it pretty hard a couple times, no issues. So if you have any idea what is causing that, maybe it's a larger volume of the intercooler. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert when it comes to vacuum pressures, like I said. But if you have any solutions or know anything, leave a comment below. So if this video helped you out, don't forget to give me a big old fat thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. And until next time, you know what to do. Just keep on repairing.